Hey everybody, Melissa Simonson here, and I am joined by Dennis Simonson. Dennis, thanks for joining me.
Absolutely.
We're going to do our leadership and management training again today, and today's topic is gamifying for your employees, or better known as how to motivate your team members. So I want to ask Dennis some key questions here about what we can do when maybe tasks are not getting done. Maybe we're not sure why. Maybe we're just not properly motivating them and we're not sure why. So Dennis, what are some of the things that you've seen that kind of lead you to the conclusion that, okay, my team members must not be super motivated because X, Y, and Z are happening, and here's what I do to fix it? Can you walk us through some of those?
Yeah, I think that it becomes obvious, when your team is less motivated. Simply, there's a bunch of different signs, and it kind of depends on who you have and what it is that their tasks are. But generally, if you're getting that sense, then the only real thing that you're missing is actual data, right? So your senses are generally going to be something you want to rely on. Like, if you don't think somebody's performing at their most efficient level, odds are you're probably right. You just maybe don't have a way of measuring it. That, and then any kind of attitude related thing, where they're like, okay, yeah, they're kind of a little dismissive, or maybe a little too quick to agree with what you're saying, but maybe not really listening. So there can be multiple things, and I think at the end of the day, there's really a few different things you can try and do to kind of nip that in the bud and maybe change that behavior somewhat.
Mm-hmm.
And it starts with basically having an understanding of what success in their position looks like, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if we're able to measure what it is that we want them to be producing on a daily basis, right? And then we have the measure of success that goes with those, like, how are they doing with compared to peak optimal output? Then you have a pretty good understanding. Do I have a star player here, or do I have somebody who used to be a star player and is now maybe not producing as well as they had been? Those are indicators of.
Your internet's cutting out just a little bit. But it sounds like having these key indicators of what success looks like, that's really the most important thing. Oh, are you back? I think you're back with me.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it starts with the understanding of whether or not these people are producing in the way that you think that they should be able to. And that's really the core. It can be something that you misunderstand or mistake, right? Maybe they've actually adapted their daily tasks in a way that makes them far more efficient than you think. And maybe they have more time available to do some of these other things that are maybe still work related, but not on the tasks that you think that they should be on. So I think understanding really what's in their daily, activity list and how long it takes them is important, and it can change, and it should change from time to time.
Right.
Especially if you're doing a great job as their manager and making them more efficient, right? If you're or new processes that can make them more efficient, and if you're able to do that, then you should have different expectations to go along with that.
Okay, so it sounds like it's most important to make sure, like, that they know their expectations, so they know when they're winning and when they are coming up short. And then I think this is actually really even more key than it comes across as upfront, because we've talked about defining your success and defining your team member's success. But I think what's really interesting about this is that there's also a belief in what you're achieving that comes from this. It's the greater purpose of the company as well, I think, folds into that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when you have a vision behind your company and you understand what it is that you're trying to achieve, then that can trickle down to every facet of what it is that you're doing. And so if you have a customer service team and your brand is all about, spectacular customer service, then you're able to look into that situation and say, hey, am I delivering on this brand value that I portray? And are my people delivering on that brand value? And then should be the same thing in the marketing aspects. And if you have people working for you in the marketing aspects, then they need to understand that, embrace those same values, and communicate those same values in all of your advertisements and all of your copy in everything that you're espousing on the front side. And then you are in charge of basically communicating that on the back side to all of your team members, to all of your internal documents, and to the expectations that you have outside of the company for external purposes, if that makes sense. So essentially, when you are deciding what this position needs to, what success looks like for that position, it should be based around what does an ideal transaction look like for this position, right? When I am creating copy, what should it look like? How should I feel as a reader of that document? What expectations should it set for this brand? And who am I targeting as a brand, right? Because all of those messages mean something, and all of those messages will have a specific meaning to a different subset of people. And so as you understand that and you communicate that to your people, they have a better contextual understanding of what it is you expect out of them and have a better chance of accomplishing that. And then when you have future projects for them, they're also better able to read into it and
adapt, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. Provide better insight, right? And then maybe you don't have to do everything. Maybe you can have them take the first stab at it, and you get a nice base to work with, something like that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, so it sounds like having like the greater purpose or the why they're doing things. Like, I think that this is actually one of the really key things as well, because like you said, it helps you to adapt the tasks, but they might have an idea that you haven't had yet. They might have a background that gives them a skill that if they know the why, they could be like, well, if we did it this way, though, that might actually be more efficient.
Well, exactly. And that's actually where you want to get, right? Yeah. When you have, even as a small company, the whole goal by hiring somebody is to have somebody who's going to specialize in that task and who's going to achieve it, hopefully at some point on a more efficient basis than you can. Yeah. Because you're split as an entrepreneur, you're split into multiple different lines of thinking. And you have to think tactical, you have to think strategic, you have to really kind of change your focus on a daily basis depending on what the task is. And as you are able to really delve into the specific tactics and are able to push those out to employees, they should be able to have better insight into what it is that their daily processes are and how they can improve better than you do. You should have a better understanding how they fit in with the greater scheme of things. But in terms of how they actually do it and what maybe some ideas are onto how they can improve it or be more efficient through that process, they absolutely should be able to do that for you. Maybe 6 months into it, they should have a much better idea than you do, because hopefully at that point, it's not something you mess with anymore. And having already sat down there and gone through that process yourself at the beginning and then created that process, now they see that and they're going to be like, step 4, especially now that we've gotten rid of this software, is really not relevant to us anymore. Or now that Amazon has changed the following policy, this doesn't really apply to what we're doing anymore. Yeah. And it shouldn't be part of the process. And as frequently as Amazon changes things and as frequently as our software gets updated, it really should be up to this person to update those processes and to understand how to do that. And by understanding really well what the daily process is and then what the expectations are, absolutely that person should have ownership of the goal of making it more efficient. And if you're doing it well, then you're going to be able to trust this person to do it because you know what their output is.
Yes. Excellent. Okay. So what about, let's say you have, an ideal situation, you've got processes and systems and everything all set up. How do you take your team, big or small, and say, okay, we have this BHAG, this big, hairy, audacious goal. What does that look like when you want?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is when you have already, understood what the processes are, and you have a big, hairy, audacious goal, as you say, then I think it's really trying to define what the key facets of that goal are, and how, when they're going to be accomplished, and what that accomplishment looks like. So define the success for the goal, and then you try to make some measurements that go along with that. So as soon as you figure out what the success is for that goal and what part these employees are going to play, then you can incentivize them based off of that goal. So if it's to launch multiple items by a certain key date, then you should probably have some specific milestones that you're going to shoot for. And in those milestones, then you can say, well, I want to have, if we achieve this goal, I want to have them share a portion of the revenue, or we'll give them a flat bonus, or maybe even just time off. Those are all things that people understand. And sometimes it's not about the flat money. Sometimes it's not about the dollar value. Study after study has shown that that actually monetary compensation doesn't actually necessarily mean as much to them as even just kudos from the manager, which shouldn't be taken the wrong way. What people are shooting for, and what employees want, is an understanding that you appreciate what it is that they're doing, right? So by setting goals and then having milestones and having a level of achievement where, hey, if you're able to do this, we're able to provide you this, that provides them with a feeling of, like you said, gamification, right? Where they're like, aha, I've achieved this, I've unlocked this achievement.
Yes.
Or, like a boss's approval achievement unlocked, right? This is what you're shooting for, is you're trying to give them something that they're trying to achieve. And then you can try and enlighten them. Hey, if we're able to do this, this is what it looks like for the company. This is what it means for this department. And that's how we're intending to go from $1 million to $3 million by the end of this year. And so now you're not just providing them with hey, go in here and do all these things because I said I need it faster. You're saying, hey, by you doing this, this is what the guy next to you is doing, and here's what the company as a whole is trying to do. And by doing that, that's how we intend to hit this revenue target, which I told you about before. And you were like, how in the world will that happen? And so these are the ways that you can tie your employees into not just an understanding of the company and the goal, but an understanding of how they fit into place with those goals with the company. And it helps them feel more secure in the job because they understand, hey, what I'm going to do here is going to help us triple our revenue. That seems important. I, therefore, am also important to that progress. Yeah. So again, you don't even have to tie it straight to compensation. And there's actually a bunch of very cool programs out there that you can do to help incentivize your people. They're worth looking into, and we can even maybe post a link with some of those things with an interview afterward. But it's really more about taking the time when you're about to provide this big, hairy, audacious goal and go through and say, listen, let's actually plan out and say, what the milestones are, and then let's tie some kind of a compensation to it. And one of my favorite things was to provide like a half a day off of paid vacation, right? Like, hey, you did really well. This was something that was unexpected. It's gonna pay some dividends to the company. Go ahead and leave right now and take a half a day. And they're just like, wow. Right? Take half a day off, enjoy yourself. And it's not something that has an upfront cost to you, right? It's, of course, you're still paying for the half day, but in the scheme of things, did that 4 hours really, was it worth this kind of extra effort that you get? Right. And those are the questions you should ask yourself. And then, I've been a part of companies that have given away like iPods, They've given away various things, and you make these goals within mind. They have to have a reward that makes them excited, right? And to the degree that you can think about what it is that they want to have. And again, you need to understand your people. Is it going to be, sometimes flat money is the best way to do it, right? Like, hey, especially in many companies, salary is like only a part of what they're making. And if you want them to be excited about the future of their opportunity with you, then you need to show them an opportunity to grow. So maybe it could just be like, this is one of the critical components to you achieving the next level of success in this company, and maybe having me consider you for an alternative position or for a pay raise or for whatever it is. But you'll find that when they understand what it is that they're playing for, what it is that they're attempting to achieve, and the direct benefits, not just of the paycheck, right? Everybody gets a paycheck, and that's for like showing up and doing what you're supposed to be doing. And so you're both kind of under a complicit understanding. Hey, if I'm showing up and I'm not fired, then I'm getting a paycheck.
Right.
And so if you want somebody to go above and beyond for you, you kind of do need to, provide additional expectations. And then hopefully, and it doesn't always have to be tied to an additional incentive, but for any kind of, like you said, like, if it's just like, hey, this week we want to achieve, this kind of efficiency, that's not necessarily something that needs to be tied to any kind of performance perk. But when you're looking at something, maybe quarterly, it could be even like maybe just once a month.
Yikes.
And that there are perks. There is.
Dennis, I don't know if you can hear me, but you're breaking up pretty bad. So let's give it a half second. I don't want you to lose everything that you're saying. Are you still there?
I hear you fine.
Okay, I can see you moving again. So I think that we're back. I think we're back in business.
Okay. I was just basically saying that you essentially want to tie those performance incentives to the more important things. It doesn't have to be everything you do doesn't require an incentive.
Right.
But you'll find that if you do something quarterly, probably at a minimum, and I think maybe maximum for monthly, tie something to an important goal for the company and find a way to involve each one of your employees, right? Like if you've got a warehouse, they factor into your sales, right? Like if your sales team shoots the moon, right? And they really hit an audacious goal, who's going to ship all that stuff? Your warehouse. And if they output at a normal efficiency level, are they going to be able to actually ship everything out within the time frames that have been promised to your customers?
Right.
Maybe not. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, hey, if you maintain this same efficiency level or you get everything out within this, here's what you get out of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's an often overlooked thing, is where oftentimes sales departments are provided bonus and additional incentives.
Yeah.
It's very easy to see what it is, what kind of an impact that they have. But when you think about who has to fulfill those orders and how well they do it and who prevents order cancellations, and this is less of a thing maybe for Amazon businesses because they're not going to cancel in the same way that other businesses might. But think about how each part of your team plays a role in that and what you can do to reward positive behaviors on their part. And that's, any gamification can potentially be taken advantage of by an employee. So it's also like you should learn from it. So if you find that it in fact encouraged a behavior you don't really want to encourage, then you might need to provide some additional guidance.
Yeah.
And then there's also, you can make it clear that your company and your brand stands for something and that they need to go into it with the right attitude. If they're just simply going into it with like, hey, I sold more stuff. Well, yeah, but you took all of Johnny's sales, right? So that's not okay.
Yeah.
Like that's not something that you're going to get rewarded for. Johnny actually gets those sales, and I can tell by this, this, and this, right? You don't, just because you can still expect your employees to behave within a brand pattern that you've outlined. And so that's why communication, again, is so important, because if you say, hey, one of the basic things we expect in this company is integrity, right? Then behaving in a honest manner, right, that's not going to be rewarded in your company. And so it's okay to remind them, like, hey, it's get as many sales as you can, but it's without leading the customer to the wrong conclusions. It's without doing shady things, right? Like, they should understand what it is that your brand and your company stand for by this point. And if not, make sure you communicate that as well.
So this might be like, in the case of an Amazon seller, this might be creating fake FOMO or something like that, where, like the furniture store that's always closing and you got to buy it now.
Yeah.
Like that.
And, again, I that's not something that I particularly like, right? Legality, maybe there's legal ways that you can make those things happen. But if that's what you're expecting your employees to do, and that's not something they're comfortable with, you're going to need to know that early on. And more importantly, if that's not what you want, and that's the kind of pool that you're recruiting from, then that's something you need to know as well. And you need to do a good job of communicating what it is that you do expect out of them, and what is positive and something that the behavior that you do want to encourage, because they've seen all kinds of things out there, and they've worked for other people, and for them it's not very simple to understand what's expected of them in the new job, right? And so the clearest terms that we can provide to them really help to qualify that in their mind, and really help them get more comfortable with it, especially then if you're tying bonuses to it and they're like, oh, this is what they want from me. Not only did I achieve that, but I've also achieved the bonus level. And you didn't even have to say anything, because it kind of goes without saying, they're doing a terrific job, right? If they're achieving a bonus above and beyond what it is that they're normally getting paid for, they're doing more than what you expect. And that's good, right? And so that's something that entrepreneurs usually have a bit of issues with, is communicating frequently enough with their employees to let them understand whether or not their employees are doing well enough. They're just going along and like, I hope this is what they want. It's to the best of my understanding, it is what they want.
Yeah.
And I haven't heard any complaints. Right. So by having the gamification, by having the understanding of these are additional markers that I can hit, and I'll get compensated, or I'll get an additional something, that lets them know that they are on the right track, and that they're making an impact in the business and how they're doing. And I'm hoping that by now you guys can start to see how each one of these facets really work together, right? Because if you're posting this job online, well, if you already have the process on how it works, and you have the measurements for success, it's not that much harder than to say, well, if this is the normal efficiency of what I believe they can achieve, if they hit a level beyond that, that might be worth something to me and to the business. And therefore, maybe I pin a raise to that, or a bi-monthly, whatever it is, maybe again, additional time out, whatever it is, something that they're going to want. And now all of a sudden, it's not just about the compensation that they get. It's also about the understanding that I'm contributing to this business. They need me, and it's important. It makes them feel good, and they're willing to do that much more for your business. They want, that feeling of success, that feeling of achievement unlocked. They want more of that, and that's why you try and do that. It really can turn around attitudes. Also, I found that when you offer some of these opportunities, that can flush out bad attitudes as well, where I've actually had somebody like, oh, well, I don't have a chance to do that, so I'm not even going to try. And so you're like, oh, wow, we're going to go ahead, and here's what's expected out of you regardless. And that gives you an opportunity then to coach that person on a one-on-one level, right? Like, okay, well, that's an attitude that's not acceptable.
Right.
I'm going to tell you that right now, right? So then it really gives you a chance to understand what motivates each one of your people better. And the overall best advice that I can give you for leadership training is that every person is different. And so if you try to approach every situation like, what is it that I can do to try and set this person on their best path in my company?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into that with that kind of thinking, it's really the best. And you can't, you can't make every employee work for you in the most efficient manner. Some just aren't cut out for it. But when you enter into it with that kind of mentality, they can see that, they empathize with it, and they're much less likely to go into it with a bad attitude or try to say, man, this guy just wants to use me for X and then get rid of me.
Yeah.
And if you find an employee that was kind of a bad egg initially, and you turn them around, that's an employee that is absolutely in love with you and the way you do business. And that's somebody who's going to be, rather than the worst player, the best player. That person is going to go out there and sing your praises to the other employees about how well you treated them, about how that you work with them. And there's nothing more powerful than that. That person is going to be a brand enthusiast for you, right? They're going to love everything about who you are and what you're trying to get done. And the only way to do that is to try and enter the situation as if it's salvageable, and what can you get from the best case scenario. And it's not easy, but when you enter in with that kind of an attitude, like that, you potentially have something to learn about what it is that this person is doing, mm-hmm. and what they have to offer. If you keep your mind open, that's how you might be able to take a bad actor and turn them into a brand advocate.
That's amazing. So much good advice in there. So I definitely think that we're going to need to have an add-on to this. We're going to have like a part 2 or maybe 3 or 4, because I think this is really important. And I think that this is kind of laying the groundwork for a big idea. And I think what we should really get into next is, what are some specific examples of ways to motivate them? And this is another thing, like, so this is where I feel like entrepreneurs kind of get in their heads and like, this is too much, I don't get it, I just can't do this. Because for one entrepreneur versus another, one entrepreneur might think, oh, well, I should give, $100 for this thing. And really a pat on the back or public recognition or a Facebook post saying, look at the amazing work they did, would suffice. And then you have the other side where it's like, well, this is just, you're essentially just doing your job. So really there's no pat on the back required here. So maybe having a little bit of some specific examples of types of goals met and types of rewards given. And then I'd love to ask you more, I think for next week, I'd love to ask you more about, how you can tell if the motivation maybe is from a personal thing, or it's, you've tried and it's a them thing and mm-hmm. not a management thing. I think we can dive in a little bit deeper to that. What do you think?
Yeah, that's that can be a long conversation. Obviously, people are very, very different, right? And so, but we can definitely talk about what are some of the trigger moments and how I dealt with those. I think that it's something that can be a bit of a quagmire if you let it. And so when when you do have a bad actor and you're convinced like, hey, there's nothing I can do to save them, then in that point you need to have specific activities that you do to solve the problem and move on, right? It is once you've identified an element that's not going to change and that's not acceptable to you, then the shortest distance between you and separating that element from your company is that's code word for firing people, is important, right? Like there's nothing worse to morale than having an employee who is unsatisfied, unhappy, and angry at the brand or the company or you yourself. And so separating that person from your other employees that are good and are salvageable, and that's really important, because I can tell you both as a manager and as somebody who's worked alongside those types of people, feeling like I'm making the same money as this guy when I'm doing everything I can to make sure this company is successful, whereas this guy's sitting next to me making the same money and having the complete opposite attitude, there's nothing that makes you feel quite as frustrated, impotent, all kinds of words fit into that.
Yeah.
But basically, that's a good way to chase all of your best employees out.
Yeah.
If you treat all your employees the same way, then you can guarantee that all of the bad employees will stay because they feel like they don't have to do anything, and the other people, they'll just ride on their coattails. Yeah. So all of the good people are going to leave because they don't like their coattails being ridden. And all of the bad people will be like, oh, fantastic. I found a spot where I don't have to try that hard and I get rewarded for it.
Yeah.
Same as the people next to me. So in some aspects, like in the way that you enforce rules, you should be blind, right? In terms of like, I'm treating everybody the same. But in terms of compensation and bonus structure, you should absolutely not come anywhere close to being blind or even-handed, right? Yeah. Reward the good people, punish the bad people. It's as simple as that. It's not easy, but it is simple in terms of understanding.
I heard there was some quote or something from somebody that was, I'm going to totally butcher it now. Now y'all get to watch this. Lifting a car engine is not complex. It's simple, but it is very difficult still. So that's maybe a good
example. Yeah, it's a simple, right. It's a similar type of event, right? It's like understanding what it is that you're trying to go for. That's easy.
Yes.
Actually getting it done in the right way is not that easy. Right. And I do have some guidance that I can provide for those bad actors. And again, it all works together. If you're looking at this series and you're going through there and you're like, well, I like this idea and I like that idea, absolutely try them. Hopefully you'll find that they work very well for you. They have for me, and I do find that I think that you'll find that they work as well. Mm-hmm. But when they really, truly start to have an effect is when you're implementing them all together. When you start to understand that the way you hire and describe your job that's available, and then measure their success, and then reward them based on that, and then manage them around that. And this all becomes a comprehensive idea of what it is that they can expect out of their relationship with you and your company, and what it is that your customers can expect out of you and your company. Now, all of a sudden, you have a brand identity that's being communicated not just by you, but also by your customers and then your employees as well. And so that's the goal, the overarching idea behind it is that when you start to do all of these behaviors, you start to see a number of the things on your daily task list start to drop off as other people start picking it up for you.
Right.
And they start doing it well, right? It's not just that they're hopping in there and they're like, I want to try to launch a new product. They also understand what type of products you're looking for. They understand what success looks like on a brand level because they've seen you do it and they've seen you treat them in the same way that your brand treats an employee and the same way that your brand's going to treat a customer. And so they understand the experience that the customer wants to have. They understand the experience that they're going to have on the back end, right? And so that's the power that you can have when all of these things are working in tandem, because you've taken the additional time to define those things before you posted the job opportunity. You've taken the time to understand what does success look like before you're trying to say, is this guy working or not working, right? Because now you are like, wait, I have some ideas about this. Oh, and then you can go back and you can tweak some of those things. But when you have them all defined and they're working together, this all works so much well. Like if it works, if it all adds up to one when it's working together, when you've done it all at the same time, when you're working on the same principles, it's a 10 times multiplier. It's exponential. So these individual activities work in and of themselves. But if you do what I'm saying across the board and you make habits of flexing that muscle where you're trying to think strategically about the positions and about how you pay them and about what efficiency looks like and what success looks like. Now, all of a sudden, your time is now spent making other people more efficient and making the launch process more efficient, and not putting out fires, but anticipating the fires that might pop up so that you can avoid them entirely. And that's the power behind what I'm trying to espouse to you.
I love it. This is so exciting. So I think we have a lot of really good starts for next week. I think we'll come back with some specific examples of some of the goals that you can set, how to maybe define those. Maybe that's a good place to start too. Maybe people are not quite sure, like, what's a reasonable goal for the number of people I have, and we can go through seller type A, B, and C for that. And then we can come up with some really good rewards, and we'll take it from there. So, Dennis, thank you again for your expertise. It is vast as always. All right. He pays me to say that. Okay, so thank you guys. We will join you again next week at the same time, same place, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.